Murderhoboing Adventures of the Worst Party Ever. Dysfunctional Incorporated. Hi everyone. All Things D&D is back with another story. The best D&D groups have names. After all, you can't just go murder-hoboing around the world without everyone knowing your name. Tell us your adventuring party's name after listening to this roller coaster of debauchery. Dysfunctional Incorporated is my friends and my first longest-lasting D&D party. It was founded by me and several of my friends, way back when we were all popping zits on our funny faces in high school, and it is primarily from this group which I will draw my stories. We only play 3.5 for any of those wondering. Apart from me and the DM, nobody else had ever played D&D before. However, the group would then go on to spend the next 6 years playing together. Dysfunctional Incorporated went through several iterations and still exists today. Although sessions are now much more rare due to life, but what a run it was. Introducing the cast. We start with our human sorcerer Dan, who accidentally put his real name on his character sheet, and we forced him to keep that as his character name. Then there was Parlier, the crappy human ranger, who showed up late and got a dumb name and boring stats. Those 15 minutes would plague him for sessions to come. Next was Vladimir Stalin Lenin Khrushchev John, or simply Vlad, the halfling rogue, whose name barely even begins to describe the depths of his idiocy. And last but certainly not least, Jorbek the Night Raider, the dwarven fighter. An overweight dwarf whose appalling stat rolls left him with negative charisma, intelligence, and wisdom, resulting in a slow, womanizing, drunken dwarf who would have been more appropriately born as a half-orc. I won't bother with their backstories because they were all garbage, but with the virgin party newly acquainted, it was time to begin our terrible, unplanned rampage of murder, vandalism, and douchebaggery. Like all D&D stories, it began in a tavern, in some small village isolated in the forest. The party draws near the entrance to the tavern, when all of a sudden, a drunken man comes staggering out of the tavern, yelling obscenities and making threatening advances on our party. The DM revealed that this was going to serve as our crash course in combat, as the four of us were to take down this drunken man to learn the ropes. However, the DM must have failed to notice that somewhere in this NPC's backstory was a lifetime spent mastering drunken boxing. The resulting brawl that ensued would go down in Dysfunctional Incorporated history. This drunk was apparently Jackie Chan, nimbly dodging every awful attack roll we threw at him, and knocking the party's fighter Jorbek unconscious on his first turn with a critical unarmed strike. The fight finally ended, with 3 of the 4 unconscious in front of the drunk, causing Dan the sorcerer to have to burn a first-level spell just to defeat the tutorial drunk. In retrospect, this beginning fight sets forth a common theme of ineptitude that would prove to follow us for as long as we played. Cue the next day. We all awake rejuvenated, although our pride significantly weakened, and after some deliberation, we decided that it would probably be a good time to go find the quest. Now, when I say we wanted to go find the quest, I mean it as literally as I can, as our search, headed by the venerable Vlad, consisted of us walking up to every single person in the village and asking them, "Do you know where the quest is?" Did I mention that this for many their first D&D session, and some immersion had yet to kick in? Anyways, this questing went on for quite some time, until eventually our DM, quite exasperated at this point, decided to throw us a bone, and inside the next house we stopped at lived an old man. When assaulted about a quest, told us of how his beloved puppy had run away and tasked us with finding him and bringing him back. Deciding that this was only slightly more interesting than questing for the quest, we decided to go find the damn dog. After a few minutes of searching, we wandered our way into the village park, where lo and behold there was the little rascal. Now we just had to go get him and bring him back. Simple enough, right? Cue Jorbek, the Night Raider, who in his excitement decides to go chasing after the puppy. Unfortunately, it appeared that he had to roll to sprint and catch the young doggy. Eager to make his first die roll of the campaign, remember he was instantly knocked out in the tutorial, Jorbek gears up and throws down a solid nat 1, resulting in him catching his foot on the ground, falling over face first and crushing the poor dog with 200 pounds of dwarven body fat, killing it instantly. As Jorbek hauls his thick dwarven body up, Dan quickly points out that the old man never specifically said we had to bring the dog back alive, and that we found him like this, pointing to the freshly crushed remains in the middle of the park. Unfortunately, this plan does not sit well with Vlad, who pointed out that there was no way that lie would hold up, and our only option was to kill the old man as well. With no overbearing objections, Parlier's voice of reason was always quietly ignored. We set out on the only course of action that made sense. We waited until the dead of night. After the town has all fallen asleep, we quietly sneak past the guards. We make our way to the old man's house. Vlad the rogue picks the lock, and we all sneak inside. The party quietly creeping our way past the empty dog bed and scattered toys, we make our way to the old man's bed, where he's sleeping peacefully. Dan leans in close and whispers to the old man, shaking him gently, "Hey, it's us. Also, we found your dog." The old man's eyes open up.
You did? Where?
The old man never finished the question, as Jorbeck brained the man with his warhammer, killing him instantly. Then, leaving everything as it was, the party snuck out of the house and stole away on the sole path leading out of the town. At this point, the DM could barely sit in his chair. He was laughing so hard. He had never had a group perform as spectacularly in their starting town as we had. Sometime after the first dungeon, we had caught wind of a legend in the city of Rockhaven, a coastal city. The legend spoke of a cursed dragon that lived in a volcano island across the moon sea, and that beneath the dragon's roost lay a sacred treasure. Coming to the realization that more loot would be needed to sustain the party's astronomical brothel dues, the party set out to plunder what they could, lest the fine ladies of Rockhaven turn a cold shoulder. Spending what they had left on a small fishing boat, they sailed out to Volcano Island to see if the legend was true. Reaching the island, they discovered that there were truths to the legend, and that a vast network of tunnels twisted underneath the volcano, inside of which a cursed dragon most reliably lurked. Upon the arrival at the first junction of the dungeon, Dysfunctional Incorporated, true to their name, suffered a falling out over a matter of dire importance, to take the right path or the left. Unable to come to an agreement, the party split up. 2 groups of 2 then trudged their way through the dungeon, struggling with many of the encounters, cause gee, if we could all decide on the same direction, maybe the fights wouldn't have been so hard. Oddly enough, the parties ended up becoming parties of 1 and 3. Jorbeck and Vlad came upon yet another junction, and had another disagreement on which path to take. Vlad ended up taking a path that led back to Dan and Parlier, leaving fearless Jorbeck wandering alone through the dungeon. Go figure. Well, eventually the party of 3 came across a group of possessed Ozairs who jumped out and attacked the party. An Ozair is basically a fire dwarf who can set people on fire with melee attacks. Unfortunately, the Ozairs proved to be too much for the 3 heroes, who were forced to surrender after Parlier fell unconscious. Hearing the clashes of battle in another hallway, Jorbeck realized that his party was probably in great danger and hightailed it following the sounds of fighting. Jorbeck comes bursting into the room and immediately sees the rest of the party, who are all on the floor, on the verge of unconsciousness, if not already, and on fire. So assuredly, he does the sensible, caring thing. He decides to stop his friends from being on fire. Quickly thinking, he decides to take one of his many loot tapestries. It was a very fine weave, and quickly throw it over the 3 PCs, protecting them from fire damage. Unfortunately, Jorbeck, fearless Night Raider, neglected to see the fatal flaw in his plan. The moment the tapestry settled atop the other party members, it promptly burst aflame, doubling the fire damage the other players were taking, and sending them all unconscious, and rounds away from death. Miraculously, after all having survived the fight due to the weakened state of the Ozairs, we promptly decided that since we did happen to be in an active volcano, it was probably due time to give Jorbeck a lesson in fire safety. So the party had to stop all progress and show Jorbeck that fire bad, and how to make bad fire go away. Jorbeck understood the first part pretty quickly. It was the second part they had to spend so much time on. Eventually, they decided that a career in firefighting was probably never in Jorbeck's future anyways, and set forth with the assurance that Jorbeck's intelligence would never be high enough to conjure fire anyway. Eventually, after suffering through our fair share of burns, bruises, and friendly fire, Dysfunctional Incorporated made its way to the top of the volcano, where the cursed dragon had made its roost, atop a mighty pile of gold. Enough gold to pay off all the pimps of Rockhaven for months on end. Unfortunately, there was the small order of the angry dragon, sitting atop the file, who despite the party's best attempts to reason with, couldn't quite understand the concept of a brother Blumpkin pie, and decided its day would be much easier if he just ate these stupid adventurers. The resulting battle that ensues goes on for some time, but through a generous amount of health potions, and the steadfast belief that they had built up an immunity to the dragon's fire by getting burnt by smaller fires. Did I mention a generous amount of HP potions? They somehow seemed to be holding their own. Well, that was at least until Dan decided to cast his last first level spell. Dan decides that this would be an opportune moment to roll a 1, since we'd been doing so well, and we really needed another setback in our lives. So he does exactly that. Now, we happen to play that in 3.5e, if a spell roll is critically failed, that the wizard has to randomly pick a magical effect from the critical spell failure chart. So lo and behold, in Dan's attempt to smite the dragon, he instead opened a 10-foot hole in the ground, right in front of the dragon. Or should I say a 10-foot hole in the ground directly underneath Parlier's feet, trapping him inside. The dragon simply looked down into the hole, cocked his head, and then blasted the hole with so much fire that with nowhere to run, Parlier was instantly vaporized. Driven on by their indifference for Parlier's death, the party eventually slayed the dragon, and after making sure that the loot was securely in our inventories, they decided to listen to the pleading of Parlier's player. We scooped up his ashes into an empty clay urn so that we could revive him back in Rockhaven. However, upon sailing back across the Moon Sea, Dan, Vlad, and Jorbeck decided to grow suddenly very sentimental about the loss of their fellow party member, and that the best way to serve Parlier's memory would be to scatter his ashes over the Moonsea. It was at this point that Parlier's player's jaw dropped as he realized what we were about to do, and to the DM's great amusement, the party slowly shook out the contents of the urn, scattering Parlier into the Moonsea. Jorbeck gave a wonderfully incoherent epitaph that seemed to focus entirely too much on some incredibly inaccurate points about fire safety. Fast forward a year or so, we have somehow completed our first few series of dungeons, with nobody of any real importance dying. The party murders its way to another dungeon, this one filled with more traps and puzzles than previous dungeons, some easy, some hard. In an attempt to show Dysfunctional Incorporated that there perhaps was more to D&D than killing things. This lesson was dutifully ignored. Well, the party had made it through about 60% of the dungeon without any legitimate hardship, until Dysfunctional Inc. chanced upon what might possibly be the greatest difficulty they've ever encountered. We walked into a large circular stone room, the only apparent exit the door we came in, magically sealing itself in stone behind us. In the center of the room was a large bronze statue of a dragon that was hot to the touch. Steam poured out of its nostrils, and from various vents hidden beneath its scales. Beneath the dragon was a stone button, and a magical stone slate, which began to flash elven runes as soon as the entrance sealed itself. A quick wisdom check from Parlier revealed that the elven runes were actually a flickering countdown that started from 10 and was counting down once per second. As the runes flicked across the slate, the amount of steam pouring off the dragon dramatically increased, making the room increasingly humid. After quickly confirming that nothing else in the room was of any significance, scared and fearing the worst, Vlad quickly ran up to the statue and slammed his hand on the stone button. The steam began to subside, and the runes stopped for a pause, before flicking back and starting to count down from 10 again. He quickly pushed it again. The countdown starts back at 10, before it even has a chance to change to 9. Vlad starts rapidly hitting the button, at which point the DM hands him a clicker in real life. The DM tells him to push the clicker every time he wants to push the button, so he doesn't have to say it every second, and let the party decide what to do without interruption. So with the sound of frantic clicking reminding us of our worst fears, Dysfunctional Incorporated decided to have a closer inspection of the room, while Vlad held off the dragon. Unfortunately, the search yields nothing of any significance, besides several wall-mounted torches, set into the wall for lighting. Then, for no joke 45 minutes real time, the party is sitting in this one room, desperately trying to figure out what to do. All the while, one of the players is sitting at the table, mashing this damn clicky clicker the entire time. They try everything, from varying the time in between button presses, trying to lift, move the dragon, plug the vents, rearrange the torches on the wall, or attempting to find the secret exit by smashing the stone walls with their weapons. Finally, after spending an eternity in the godforsaken room, the party decides that they're just best off, despite their low health, letting the counter tick down to 0 and attempting to kill the dragon, hoping that it does not instantly kill them all with fire breath or something. However, this decision is not taken lightly, and it is after much deliberation that this is decided upon. However, even when letting the counter tick down to 0, a member of the party kept getting scared at the amount of steam pouring out, and stating that they haven't thought of all the options, and pushing the button resetting the countdown. Again, this continued on for some time, until the party finally grows the balls and lets the countdown tick all the way down to 0, at which point the steam has fully filled the room. They hear a loud thunk, and all of a sudden the steam quickly disperses. A magic unseen doorway had appeared on the opposite side of the room. Dysfunctional Incorporated once got stuck in a room for almost an hour because we couldn't stop pushing a button for 10 seconds. Another time, Dysfunctional Incorporated was traversing through a fire-themed dungeon and was embroiled in a challenging fight inside a lava-filled room. It should be noted that by this point Parlier, the ranger, had saved enough money to buy himself a hawk and decided to bring the lucky level 1 animal with us on our quest. You can already tell that this animal's lifespan was significantly shortened the moment he was purchased by the party, but such is the nature of things in this world. Anyway, the wizard Dan had somehow managed to trap himself high on a rock outcrop, some 40 feet above the floor of the room. However, after using most of his spells, he could not rain down fire and brimstone as effectively from his perch anymore. He decided that he wanted to come down and rejoin the party. The problem being, due to the party's destructive nature, some of the lava pools on the floor had been diverted, and the floor directly beneath Dan's outcrop was covered in lava, preventing him from just jumping down. He seemed to not care it was a 40-foot drop. So instead, in the middle of battle, he decides that he's going to have Parlier's hawk come fly up to him, at which point he would grab hold of him, and they would glide down to safety. In retrospect, it's hard to decide who was worse when it came to making plans, Dan or Vlad. Anyway, he whistles for the bird to come up and grab him, which despite Parlier's protests, it does. Once the hawk is right in front of Dan, he decides to jump off the outcrop and grab a hold of its legs. Mind you, this is not a large hawk, just your average size 5-foot bird. Miraculously, he grabs hold of the bird's legs and rolls a 19 strength check to hold on. See, Parlier? I told you it wouldn't be a problem. The DM then turns to Parlier and says, okay, it's your hawk, so you get to roll the bird's strength check to carry Dan. The entire group face palms. Parlier drags out his d20 and rolls out a solid 3. After size penalties, the total comes down to a -2 on the flight check. So Dan, holding on ever so tightly to the hawk, plunges straight down off the outcrop into the lava 40 feet below, dragging Parlier's brand new bird with him. The kicker? Dan did enough damage during the fight to level up once it was finished, so via glitch in the Matrix, he respawned with full health and a slew of new spells. The bird did not. Parlier was more than displeased. Less of an individual story, and more of a general case of Dysfunctional Incorporated's debauchery and mayhem, would be the story of Ivan the Terrible. So earlier on in Dysfunctional Incorporated's history, they happened to defeat the final boss of a dungeon, which happened to be a large mother Gravorg. Now, a Gravorg is, for those unaware, a large raccoon-like creature, although they can grow to much greater sizes than your average raccoon, that has the ability to control gravity. It can reverse gravity for a certain area, do a concentrated gravity burst around itself, flinging everyone away, and its preferred method is to kill its enemies by bouncing it off the ceiling and letting it fall to its death. So, having heroically killed the Gravorg and looting its treasure trove, the party turns to leave, when they hear a soft mewing noise behind them. They turn around and find a young Gravorg pup, sniffing the remains. "I adopt the baby Gravorg, and I shall call him Ivan the Terrible," instantly screams Vlad. Hence, the party had now adopted Ivan the Terrible, and he was to aid us in our adventures. What nobody told the party was that to command Ivan the Terrible required a charisma roll. Now, the highest charisma of any party member was -3. According to the D&D Player's Handbook, this charisma correlates to the charisma of an octopus or squid. People's first impression of our party was, I like those guys about as much as if they were a bunch of squids right now. So needless to say, every attempt to command Ivan the Terrible resulted in less than desirable results. That being said, it was always a little amusing to watch one of your party members turn and yell at Ivan, "Ivan, gravity reverse!" and point to an enemy, only to watch the party member get thrown 60 feet into the air and come crashing down, simply because he made a mediocre roll. To the monsters' credit, somewhere in their imaginary minds, they must have gotten a chuckle or two standing in a room, only to have our party smash down their door, and watch dumbstruck as the party gets immediately flung into the walls of the room, because Ivan decided to use Gravity Burst, and nobody could tell him otherwise. I'd like to think that's worth a sensible chuckle at least. What became of Ivan the Terrible? Well, several dungeons later, and with nobody bothering to put valuable points into charisma, Dysfunctional Incorporated got fed up with Ivan and sealed him in a box, and threw the box into a volcano. There was also the time the party had to go and investigate who was stealing prized tapestries from the rich and influential owner of the terrific tapestry emporium, and while most of the party decided to head off and chase some leads across town, Gorbalok's Bloodstomper, the party's bard, decided that he would go earn some quick coin by going to perform for some lucky townsfolk. So the bard's attempt to play music for the man actually just ends up with the bard savagely beating the man over the head with his instrument, after which he takes off to avoid the retribution of the villager, who's staggering to his feet swearing to gods and demons. Eventually, Gorbalox is able to make his escape, and after waiting to make sure the coast is clear, he decides to try his luck again, because things couldn't go much worse than that. So, filled with the realization that he has to play significantly better to make up for the coin he missed last run, Gorbalox saunters up to another man and decides to play him a song on his lute. Rolls perform. Nat 1. It's the same guy. Once again, the poor villager is savagely beaten with the lute. Unfortunately, this time around, the villager chases Gorbalox for much longer, until they chance upon a patrol of guards walking through the town. Gorbalox, ever aware of his ridiculous bluff check, decides to convince the guards that the man was set out to kill him, which was in itself not really a bluff. That part was very much true. Gorbalox just decides to conceal why the man might be feeling the way he does, or why he was covered in bloody gashes. Needless to say, he rolled a 19 on his bluff check. The guards caught the poor villager, beat him to death, and apologized to the bard, tipping him for his troubles. The party's frolicking along on their new quest when they come across a new town. Hungry for quests, adventure, and gold, mainly gold. The party strolls into town hall looking for the mayor. Unfortunately, they were greeted by his secretary, informing them that the mayor is not in right now. Never one to pass on an opportunity, our bard, Gorbalox Bloodstomper, walks up to the secretary and says, "No, you misunderstand. I'm the new mayor." Rolls bluff versus sense motive. "Huh, well, I guess you are the mayor now. That's odd. I thought you were just in the bathroom, but I guess it was my mistake." We all just stand there awestruck that within seconds of walking into a new town, our bard became the mayor. Everyone except Gorbalox, who strikes a pose and says, "Oh, my dear, that's not even the half of it. I'm also Batman." Rolls bluff, nat 20. "Oh, well, golly gee, Mayor Batman, it's such an honor to work for you." Gorbalox then spends the next 15 minutes approving secret mayoral plans for his own personal Batcave, complete with the town's entire supply of brass buttons, so that he can monopolize the brass button market and make a fortune. That's just some of the insane and idiotic things the party did over the years. What's your party's name? Every good party needs to have a name. These might be some of my favorite over-the-top stories I've ever heard. Can you top them? Please let us know what you think and comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, All Things D&D. Our next video will be posted in 3 days, so stay tuned for more amazing Dungeons & Dragons content.